So I'm really excited to be here for multiple reasons, mostly to support Annabelle, who's done such an incredible job of putting all this together, but also because and Sustainable Fashion Week and A Single Thread has been a big fan of Venetia's for a while, and it's the first time we met in person. So it's really exciting after all these years. I've got her bio here in front of me, and it's a really impressive list. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Venetia initially to just introduce herself and just to give us an overview of her work so that you can get to know her before we go a little bit deeper into what she's been doing.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Venetia La Manna. I'm a fair fashion campaigner and content creator. I'm also a charity shop volunteer, and I work as the UK representative of the Speak Volumes campaign, which is a campaign initiated by the All Foundation, who are based in Ghana, and they support the secondhand and resale community in Cantonmanto market, which is the largest resale market in West Africa. So that's like top line what I'm about. And I use social media to hold fashion brands and multinational corporations account for their worker rights abuses, their greenwashing, their oversupply, and their crimes against humanity. So just very light stuff.
Yeah, it's really, really impressive. And I thought we could start by going right back to the beginning to see how you became initially interested in fashion justice. Was there a specific moment or a realization that shifted for you fashion from being something that you loved into something that you felt compelled to challenge?
Interestingly, I don't think I actually fell in love with fashion until I started learning about So Fashion. It's only kind of since 2018 that I've really deepened my connection and my relationship with my clothes. But very short and briefly, I was working as a TV producer and a presenter in 2017 or maybe 2016, 10 years ago. And I did a job with ASOS, fast fashion brand ASOS. And they, as part of my payment, gifted me a bunch of clothes. And I couldn't believe how much they were giving me. And also I was kind of slightly taken aback by the quality of the clothing, which wasn't super brilliant. And at this time, because of my role as a TV presenter, I was presenting a daily live show 4 days a week. I was kind of over-consuming and kind of taking on a lot of clothes from PRs and fashion PRs because I wanted to wear something hot, new and trendy every day. And at that time, my ears just started pricking up when people started talking about garment workers and kind of the injustices that we weren't really seeing so much back then, or they hadn't really entered my realm back in 2016 in the way that they had, I think, for a lot of people before that because of the Rana Plaza tragedy. But that's kind of when it started entering my ether. And I think also because I was getting a bit older, I was doing more kind of meditation and yoga, where I was really thinking about the kind of wider impacts of all of my choices. And I couldn't believe what I started learning about in terms of fashion. And I just started talking about those things on social media. I committed to not buying new clothes. I started sharing my old outfits of the day, and it just kind of started this great unraveling.
Yeah. I remember that was hashtag was OOTD, wasn't it? Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
I still use it.
It's such a good one to really just make something so fundamental into something so simple in terms of messaging. So you co-founded Remember Who Made Them back in 2020?
Yeah.
From my perspective, I was thinking about the difference in the time between 2020 and now. It's about similar since I've been working on Sustainable Fashion Week, and my sense is the mainstream mindsets are shifting. The kind of understanding of what's going on in the industry is very, very different. Even if we're still miles away from where it needs to be, it is very, very different. But at that time, what felt most urgent in terms of looking at garment worker rights and experience, and tell us a little bit about that campaign, Remember Who Made Them, and what it revealed about labour in fashion?
So in 2020 was sort of my first foray into fashion organising, I would say. I'd kind of dipped my toe into kind of activism up until that point, but this is when I started to organise. And I launched a campaign called Remember Who Made Them with my friends Swati, Davy and Ruby. And at that time, garment workers globally were being left without wages for work that they had already completed. And we thought this was absolutely shocking. And at the same time, we were seeing fast fashion brands like ASOS come out with T-shirts saying clap for our NHS. And we knew that those very T-shirts were made by people who weren't being paid for that labour. So we teamed up and we spoke to lots of different worker unions around the world, from everywhere from Cambodia to Mexico to Pakistan. And we launched a campaign and podcast with a mission to hear from garment workers about their dreams, their desires, their demands, and also crucially to ask the question, how can I be in solidarity with you? I think that was the most crucial aspect of the campaign for us, because without garment workers and without their dignity and without their rights, what is the fashion industry? It's just pure exploitation. And so we really wanted to connect back to the predominantly women who make our clothes and hear from them and amplify their voices. So that's how the campaign started. And at the same time, the Pay Up campaign was launched, which was was run by a host of different allied worker rights groups, partly Remake, who sadly have just decided to close their doors. But together, with their support of garment workers, unions, and concerned citizens like us, they managed to unlock $22 billion in unpaid wages for garment workers, which was a real win and a real show that when we organise together, we can create change and we can be part of change. So that was 2020. And yeah, you're totally right. Since then, it feels like the conversation around sustainable fashion is much more on the map. People are much more aware of the kind of poly crisis that big fashion is responsible for. But sadly, we still have a long way to go.
It feels like there's miles, isn't it? It's just,
yeah.
I think the conversation is moving forward and the kind of language used is shifting, but it feels like actually action and impact is still, we're still just, worlds away from what we need to see.
Yeah.
But that idea of language is sort of neatly leads me on to the next question I wanted to ask, which is around, if fashion is fundamentally, the industry as it is based on a culture of extraction and exploitation. And obviously exploitation is all the people and communities involved in the system, but that idea of extraction takes me towards greenwashing and this idea that we're shifting language, we're shifting what we believe is a dialogue, but actually that those fundamental principles of fashion are still there. In terms of greenwashing and how the industry is now trying to present itself as being better, for me, it goes far beyond simply being misleading to consumers, but actually sort of dips into this darker underbelly of power and manipulation and capitalist wealth structures. But from your perspective, why is greenwashing so effective, and what's the sort of in terms of a macro lens, what's the harm that it causes?
Okay, so for greenwashing, just top line for anyone who's new to the term, it's basically when a brand uses misleading terms to convince us that they're doing something, climate friendly or eco or conscious or sustainable. But the reality, as we know, is that their garment workers aren't earning fair living wages and that these very brands are also oversupplying. So they're making more clothes than we could possibly ever hope to wear. And yeah, I think it's more than misleading. I mean, thankfully, the ASA in the UK are doing a great job at kind of clamping down on greenwashing, and they've been going after brands, which is really wonderful to see. But I think you're right. I think it is actually quite violent because it conditions us as citizens to believe that our only power when it comes to organising for a fairer fashion industry is what we buy. And our power is so much more than what we buy. And I think that kind of lends itself really well to what you were saying about how it kind of leans into the capitalist, extractive system that we're really used to. And also it just completely covers up the reality of what's happening for the people who are making our clothes and the people who are on the front lines of the textile waste crisis. So it's really, really important if you see any brand greenwashing and something feels a bit off to you, report it. report it immediately. One of the things that I learned from the Remember Who Made Them campaign from garment workers, the garment workers that we spoke to, is that brands care so deeply about their public image. Marks and Spencer spends £220 million annually to crown themselves a sustainability leader, yet they're the number one most commonly discovered British brand found polluting Ghana's beaches. They care about that. They care about their image so much. You've probably seen what's been happening with their food waste recently on social media. They really deeply care about their public image. So hold them accountable. If you see something that doesn't look right, see it, say it. Really, really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's really interesting to look at that, the power dynamic now around who's responsible and who has the power to change things. And there's so much focus on the industry, as well there should be, in terms of, looking into the murkiness of the supply chain. But clearly we need to pressure industry to change. We need to pressure policymakers to get really tight regulations to help with that process. But if we flip it and we take it back to the citizen, and like you were saying with the Pay Up campaign, like the power we have when we work collectively and we join together, how do you feel about that tension in terms of responsibility? Because we're always looking at how citizens can shift the dial through organising, working together, and pressuring upstream. Yeah. But in terms of that tension, how do you feel about where we should put most of our efforts in terms of changing our demand or really pressuring the industry to change?
I think it totally depends on where we're at as individuals and what we have kind of access to, because if you're a caregiver or a parent, I appreciate you have less time to kind of participate in collective organising, or if you have access needs. But at the same time, I do believe that organising against extractive and colonial systems like capitalism is actually all we have. And from my perspective, I see my role as an organiser as someone who's fighting for a better world for all of us as a lifelong commitment. And there's going to be times in my life where I'm able to commit absolutely loads and give so much more time and attention to it. And there's going to be other times where I'm less able to do that. And I think it's really about, the thing is about fashion is I see fashion as one aspect of a system, this part of the system that needs to change. This is this part of the system which I feel like I have the most kind of sway in, and where I'm able to create the most amount of change. But I see all liberation struggles as completely inextricably linked. So I think it's about thinking about you and your community and where you can make the most amount of tangible change. So in terms of fashion justice organising, if that's something you're interested, supporting a labour rights group in the UK like Labour Behind the Label would be a wonderful way to go. Supporting a grassroots campaign like the Speak Volumes campaign, which I can tell you more about, is a great way to go. But I think it's about, to me, and looking at we're currently in a time of billionaires' wealth increasing daily, fascism is on the rise, AI is becoming more and more terrifying, and yet we have incredible people like Hannah Spencer, who's just won the Green Party seat. And that was a result of collective organising. That was conversations outside community centres. That was conversations outside schools. That was amazing volunteers, like the volunteers today, coming together and saying, hang on, I've got a bit of time, I can do my part. That to me is hope. That to me is so encouraging. And that is how we create change.
Yeah, 100%. that was just the most wonderful thing to wake up to when you just look at someone who's so, who just speaks, I don't know, I felt, so I could relate to her. She was someone who would speak the voice that I wanted, use her voice for what I wanted to say. Yeah. But like you said, it's the fact that was really achieved through people coming together and working together it's such a testament to collective action.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm actually going to skip the question I was going to ask next and maybe hopefully come back to it, because I wanted to go on from that to talk about Palestine, actually, and to talk about, you've been amazingly outspoken on about clothing in Palestine and that link. And like you say, liberation struggles, that all of these are quite interconnected. Yeah. But that this is obviously a subject which is really, really what's the right word? What's I'm saying? It's an activating subject for a lot of people, but so it's one that many people avoid, and something that I'm so impressed by is when I watch your videos and you've just got that sticker on the front of your microphone, which I would encourage everyone to follow Venetia on Instagram, and it is just Venetia La Manna, isn't it? And in her videos, she's got one of those little funny microphones that people have these days, which are like make you look like a giant. But it's the Palestine flags on the front, isn't it? And I think it's that the use of your voice in that way to constantly bring people back to something that's so important. And by doing that, and just even if it's just in that visual way, that visual reminder, you're linking lots and lots of things together. Even if that specific video isn't necessarily about that specific subject. Why do you believe in this subject here? Why do you believe that fashion can't be neutral on Palestine? And how can we as citizens, like in terms of what's going on in Gaza and as consumers, how can we bring those two things together and act and choose ways of supporting, even if it feels quite passive?
I have been speaking about the kind of colonial extraction within fashion since 2018. And when I started learning about Palestine, which was late, I was so late to the game. I started learning about it in early 2023. I thought to myself, hang on a second, I've been talking about, colonial systems for all these years. This is also colonial extraction. And prior to the genocide, workers in Palestine, workers in Gaza had a really thriving textile industry. And workers in Palestine were making clothes for Israeli brands because the labour was so much cheaper, which is exactly, what big British fashion brands use. They export their labour to countries in global majority countries because it's so much cheaper. And so kind of drawing these links together, I was like, hang on a second, this is something that I should be being really vocal about. And also, I'm sure anyone can relate to this. When you're watching a genocide be live streamed in the palm of your hand and you're being screamed at by Palestinians in Gaza who are saying, please speak up for us. Our power is our voices, amplify our voices. I felt like I have to say something. I have to do something. But yeah, it's a really fraught issue, like you say, and it can raise a lot of people's temperatures in quite extreme ways. And it's been so horrifying to watch. But in terms of, what we can do as citizens, as so many people have been doing here already, speaking up, joining your local Palestine Solidarity campaign is a great thing to do. But also boycotting is so important. So I'm sure you might be familiar with the BDS campaign. And they have fashion brands who they are saying these are brands to specifically target and boycott. One of which is Reebok, who are the sponsors of the Israel Football Association. They've been working tirelessly to get sports brands to divest from the IFA, and they have done so successfully with brands like Puma, which is incredible that was an absolute win, and now we're going after Reebok. And another brand is Zara. Zara is now one of the main consumer targets of the BDS campaign. And obviously Zara has a horrendous track record of garment worker exploitation. Zara to me is, Shein couldn't run if Zara hadn't walked. And they've been oversupplying for years. And of course, since the start of the genocide, they've only increased their investment in Israel. They just launched their largest store ever in Tel Aviv. So that to me shows a brand that really doesn't care and is happy to invest in a settler colony. And so as citizens, we need to be spreading that message. We need to be boycotting super hard. And I know boycotting could be super overwhelming because the list that you see is so long and there are so many brands. My recommendation would be to really, if you can, just stick to the BDS list specifically, stick to those targets. That's Palestinian led, and those are the people we need to be taking our lead from.
It's a great site, and it was my colleague Carly who put me onto it. And we're working on a campaign where there's a fashion brand which is a good fashion brand that we were thinking of including in this campaign, and it was only through looking at that website that we realised their parent company.
Yeah. I already know the brand.
Yes, you already know the brand.
I've called them out.
So but it's even when there's an assumption of goodness that sometimes you need to dig a little bit deeper to find that actually they're probably better not to support.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting, and it's amazing how, like you said, all these things are so interconnected. Just because we've obviously started a little bit late, so I'm just going to be a little bit conscious of time. I'm just going to very quickly ask you about your work with the All Foundation and the Stop Waste Colonialism campaign. And tell us a little bit about that, because I think this is so fundamental to everything that we as citizens and consumers are participating in. Is, again, volumes, like the sheer amount that we are drowning in globally, clothing. So in terms of waste colonialism, what does that look like in practice, and how... I'm not going to go too much into EPR because it's a big thing, but EPR legislation is where, in simplest terms, which you could probably phrase better than me, it's where you make the brands responsible for the amount of waste that they're producing post-consumer to a certain extent. So it's looking at how to make brands more accountable for the clothing after it's been used. Tell us about that.
So thank you for saying that this is a really important, campaign and legislation, because I completely agree. To me, this is the most important piece of legislation that we need, and this is one of the most pressing issues within the fashion industry. So estimates suggest that we're currently producing between 80 and 150 billion items of clothing every single year. That's a data discrepancy of 70 billion. We can't hope to legislate what we can't see. So the All Foundation, via the Speak Volumes campaign, is calling on all brands to share their production numbers, their annual production numbers in units, not weight. And at that point, we can hope to close the data gap and from there create EPR legislation. EPR legislation is something that exists for many sectors already, but in terms of fashion, it is being pushed through in the EU. However, not strongly enough, and not with frontline communities in mind. So yeah, like you said, EPR, imagine you go to H&M, you buy a t-shirt, there would be a fee embedded in the cost of that t-shirt that would pay for the entire life cycle of that garment. What my friends in Ghana at the All Foundation is asking for is for that money to cross borders so that it supports people on the front lines of the textile waste crisis who are already doing more upcycling, resale and repair than big fashion brands could ever possibly hope to. For context, Kantamanto Market, which is in Accra, in the capital city of Ghana, receives 15 million used garments from countries like the UK, USA, Germany and France every single week. The reason why we refer to this as waste colonialism is because the clothes are of such poor quality. So when you donate something to charity or you give something to a textile recycling bank, it will be, and it can't be sold in a charity shop. It will be collected and aggregated at huge centres across the UK, sorted again. The best quality clothes go to Eastern Europe. The poorest quality clothes go to countries like Kenya, Ghana and Uganda. And this is what we mean about waste colonialism. We're not just giving these clothes to these countries. Retailers like, for example, my friend Mary, who's been a resale retailer for the past 10 years, is receiving a massive bale of our unwanted, stained, scrappy, dirty, smelly clothes and is paying upwards of £350 for them. So I think this is something that as a charity shop volunteer, I care deeply about charity shops in the UK. I love them. I love to support them. I work in one. But we have to be really specific and really careful when we donate something, how much of a good deed are we doing? If it's a beautiful item that still has plenty of life, if it smells okay, that's a good deed. We're doing something good. We can feel proud to be donating that item. But what if that item has just been scooped off our teenage son's floor and has been dumped in a black bin liner along with 50 other items to be then sorted by me, to be then collected by an aggregator, to be then shipped off to my friend Mary. If Mary was here, she would say, we deserve good quality clothes too. So that's something that I think about deeply. You know, what does this excess mean for Mary? And this is why EPR could change the game, because it would mean big fashion brands, the ones who are most responsible for oversupplying more clothes than we could ever possibly hope to wear, would be paying retailers like Mary to do the work that they're already brilliantly doing, but with the resources that they need. Mary shouldn't be paying for our donated trash. She should be supported. And this is coming already, but we really need to be pushing for EPR that's globally accountable, which means that it crosses borders and supports frontline communities. It's a really dense topic, but hopefully that's given you like a tiny bit of insight.
Thank you. That's perfect. And I'm going to have to just wrap it up now because we're a little bit behind. So in one sentence, if you can, what gives you a sense of possibility or momentum in fashion justice right now?
Oh my gosh, big question.
It's huge. Sorry.
I mean, I'm really encouraged by events like today. I think it's so wonderful to see so many people coming together, interested in making, repairing, mending, showing off their upcycled designs. That shows a real want and a real need for a slower type of fashion and a much more considered type of fashion. And I'm really inspired by people who want to learn how to make and upcycle and create and repair. And to be honest, that's such a big part of the puzzle, because once we all understand the importance of that, we're going to start questioning, 30, 50, 100 of the same t-shirt on a rack, or an endless scroll on an app like Temu or Shein, which feels a bit like TikTok, and garments being turned around by Zara in a matter of weeks. That will start to feel really, really shifty and really fishy. So I think, events like today is one aspect of what gives me hope. And then, of course, my friends in Kantamanto, in Accra, in Ghana, their kind of constant persistence at changing the system, and they're forming cooperatives there. They're doing incredible work cleaning local beaches where all of this excess clothing is ending up. They are upcycling our used and unwanted clothes into items like this, into items like this. They're so innovative and so incredible, and we have so much to learn from them. So there is so much to be hopeful about, I think, and I genuinely feel very hopeful, and that's why I continue to feel very passionately about this topic and about this work.
Thank you. Thank you.